started. Welcome to this presentation of How Did a Gal from Kalamazoo End Up Writing a Novel Set in Russia? This is part of the West Hollywood Russian Festival. And before I get started, I just want to thank the organizers for including me in the program. It's been wonderful to see the different postings on social media about some of the local businesses in West Hollywood that have Russian connections. And today was a very dreary day in London. So I took a little break from some research that I was doing, and I watched the wonderful virtual tour of West Hollywood and learned a little bit more about some of the architecture and the connection to the Russian-speaking community there. To be honest, I had no idea that West Hollywood had such a large Russian-speaking diaspora. And so it's wonderful to learn more about it and to, to see a little bit more, to have a little bit of sunshine coming from West Hollywood into London. So today, as I said, my name's Molly Gartman, and I'm the author of The Girl from the Hermitage. Today, I am going to be talking a little bit about my experiences in Russia and how they influenced my book. And I will say honestly that I never could have written this book without having lived in Russia. So I wouldn't have had the idea, and it would have been impossible to write the book. So I definitely drew on those experiences. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to read a little bit from the book as well. And there'll be time for questions at the end of the session. And so if you do have questions, just tap them into the chat, which I think we are all really used to doing. And you can, I'll try to answer them as best as I can at the end of the session. Okay, so with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So as the title implies, I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, in the 70s and 80s. So during that time, I never met a Russian. I didn't have any kind of family connection to anywhere in the Soviet Union. So really, my experience of Russia was everything Hollywood told me, or what I would have learned in school or on the news. So, you know, the most important thing was beating the Soviet Union in ice hockey when the Olympics rolled around. And in general, Russians were people to fear, and that, you know, they're taking over the world at any moment. So it was a Cold War childhood of that was the image of Russia. So really, my connection to Russia began when I went to Michigan State University. And there, I was very keen. I was a business student, and I went there in 1990. I was very keen to study a foreign language alongside my business studies because I was really keen to live overseas after I graduated. And I was hoping to continue my French studies, and the class that I needed was full, and the only classes available were either Russian, Japanese, or Arabic. And in that moment, I just ticked the box and signed up for Russian. So without really thinking about it or considering it for a long time period, I just ticked the box and went with it. And that one box that I ticked, it has significantly changed my life. We can fairly say. So there I was at Michigan State in 1990. I went to the very first class. And I remember that day because the teacher went around the room and he asked everybody uh, to introduce themselves and tell their major. And everybody around the table was history, literature, journalism, these kinds of majors. And I was the only business student in the room. And at the time, he laughed at me and he said, "Well, what are you going to do? Spread capitalism around the Soviet Union?" And I, it caught me off guard when he said this because I hadn't really, I don't know. It was just a awkward moment when he said this. Um, and so there I was studying, and then things changed significantly in the coming years when the Soviet Union ceased to exist, and Russia, and many changes happened, opening it up to business possibilities. So suddenly it wasn't so crazy that I was a business student uh, sitting in a Russian class. Also, during this time, I became very involved with a student organization called ISEC, and that is a French acronym. Um, and this organization has a very lofty goal of the fulfillment of peace, peace and fulfillment of humankind's potential. Now, this is a huge goal, and this is largely done through fostering international understanding between people. And this organization became very important to me. And I took on various leadership positions, and I got very involved with it. And, um, and it was through this organization that I came to learn about working, a possibility of working in Russia. So this was a very important organization for me. But before I get into that, in '93, I had my very first trip to Russia. So I studied one summer in St. Petersburg. So that was my first experience of, I had met some Russians at university through the language classes, but this was my first experience of actually going there. And at the time in '93, it was an eye opening experience because when I got there, um, it was a country in a very difficult situation economically. Uh, it was struggling at that time. So this was not a country that was about to take over the world, or um, even that it just didn't seem like it should be feared on the level that I had been told throughout my childhood. So it made me realize and ask a lot of questions of maybe there's more to this country than what I've been told growing up. And it made me question a lot of what I was told as I was growing up. And alongside that, the historical aspect of Russia as well, particularly when it came to the Second World War. And in history classes when I was growing up, Russia was scarcely mentioned in discussions about World War II. And of course, going to St. Petersburg, you get a much different view of the war than what I would have grown up with. And again, so this was just all part of the growing up and learning more about the big world. And I think all countries are like this. As students grow up and start to travel, they just see the world from many more perspectives. Um, so after that summer, I went back to Michigan State and was continuing very active in ISEC. And it came up through my network of ISEC friends that there were two ISEC alumni who are American, and they had started a courier service in Moscow. And they were looking for someone to do sales and marketing, um, to come and work for a year, so a work placement. Um, and at the time with Isaac, many of my friends were going on work experiences all over the world. So I grabbed this opportunity with two hands, and my parents must have thought I was crazy, and but I just did it. I just jumped. So this company is called Pony Express. It's still an active company today. I'll tell you a little bit about Pony Express. Um, so the company was founded by Tim Bryant and Mark Wheeler. This is his birthday, so cut him some slack for being without a shirt here. Um, so both of them were under 30 when they started the company in the very early 90s in Russia. It started with courier services just between Moscow and St. Petersburg, and it grew very, very rapidly as new companies came in. The courier services grew, and the clients grew. So my job, and here I am at this table, sitting next to my mother. Um, my job was to go out and find new clients. So it was mostly direct marketing, and it was mostly international customers when we first started. So as they would open their offices around Russia, they would need to be able to connect with either offices or clients all over the place. Tim had started Federal Express, and they were only interested in the international services. And so Tim saw this potential to start this company and focus on services around the former Soviet Union. Now, the reason I've chosen these two pictures, this is from the same day on the far left and far right, that this was a birthday party, Mark's birthday, at one of our employees' dacha. And this dacha is very much the inspiration for the dacha that I write about in The Girl from the Hermitage. Um, I don't think on this day, I don't think I ever went inside this little dacha. It was a very simple wooden dacha. Um, but around the dacha was this wonderful, lush green garden, and there was flowers and there was vegetables, and it was just this explosion of green. And as I was writing The Girl in the Hermitage, a dacha plays a very big role throughout the book, and I was very much thinking about this particular place, um, and so it's little things like this that helped me write this book. Um, Also, there's characters in the book that are very much influenced, or they started with the idea of various friends that I know. Um, so the book itself, I meant to mention, because some of you probably haven't read it. The book is about a artist who, as a small child, she survives the siege of Leningrad, and she grows up to become a very successful artist and a teacher at the art academy in St. Petersburg in Leningrad. And it follows her life into, so it's in the 70s a little bit, and follows her life into the 90s and how the changes affect her and her family and into present day. And her dacha plays a big role, and so this is where I got this inspiration. Um, some of the characters as well were very much rooted in the people that I knew. So, for example, this person here, his name is Igor, and he really is the computer programmer at Pony Express to this day. And in my book, there is someone who is named Eager, and he is the computer programmer. But as I was writing, he changed drastically. So he's actually a very, very nice man, wonderful man. And in the book, he changes significantly. So it's these sorts of things that have really influenced the book. Um, the other thing I want to mention is throughout my time in Moscow in these years. So I arrived in '94 and I left in 2000. And throughout this time, when I was going through my photographs to take to put together this presentation, um, the vast majority of my photographs are big groups of people sat around big tables filled with food and drink and broad smiles. And this, so it really gives a flavor of the wonderful experience that I had there. As I said, I was supposed to go for 1 year and I ended up staying for 6. So I was clearly having a very good time. This center picture is some of the employees of Pony Express, and they're here standing in front of these crates where we would sort the mail. So it's all divided by city, and then the cities are all divided by airport. There's 4 airports in Moscow, so they're all ready to be bundled up and shipped out. Now, I will say Pony Express, as I was preparing for this, I had a look at their website now. So Mark and Tim, they sold the business quite a while ago. And the business, it went from a very small acorn when I was there, a very small acorn, and it is now a mighty oak because the website um, is just very glitzy, glamoury, and the website itself is in Chinese, Russian, and English. The all sorts of great pictures of the inside of their warehouse, which is it isn't something like this. It's something much much more glamorous. So it's wonderful to see that this company has gone on to be such a success after this time. But it started very, very modestly. While I wasn't working, I also had lots of different Russian friends, and as I said, lots of pictures of crowds around tables having a good time. Here I am again, and many of these characters, again, I either used names or descriptions that helped me create these characters in the book. And additionally, my friend Natasha's mother, Nina Ivanovna, she just happens to be born in the same year, 1933, as my heroine in the book. So uh, whenever I would get stuck and I wasn't sure what my heroine, Galina, would do in my book, I would think about Nina Ivanovna, and I would just imagine what she would do in a certain situation or how she would respond. And I probably even called Natasha a few times and asked her, what do you think your mother would do in whatever the situation was. So again, this is a just I have such fond memories of my time in Russia. And so while writing the book, I just feel like I really reconnected with that time. And also, I think when I was there and I was having a good time and meeting all these interesting people, I don't think I fully appreciated the monumental historical changes that were going on in the country. Um, and in the process of writing this book, I definitely came to think about that topic much much more. Um, so while I was in Russia, I also enjoyed buying paintings and a couple of sculptures. So at the time, the artwork was very inexpensive, and there was a big art market that you could go to. I was also in a group that would visit studios, so I could meet different artists and see where they were working. Um, and so it was it was just something fun that I did while I was there. Um, so when my time came to leave Russia, very sadly, um, by that time I had a husband as well. So I came to Russia with a backpack and two suitcases, and I left with a husband and a 20-foot shipping container full of stuff. Um, and we went through this period of moving quite a lot. We had 6 international moves in the first 8 years of marriage. And
Wow.
wherever we went, we always had these Russian treasures with us. And so they would hang on our wall no matter where we were. And it was just a wonderful souvenir of our time in Russia. And and I still have all of them to this day, even though, our house in England is probably the smallest house that we've lived in since. But I've found a place for all of them. So it's just a wonderful memory of that time. Now, some years later, so we ended up coming back to London in 2008. And many years later, this would have been 2014 now, um, I was Googling about the artist who painted this painting. And her name is Ludmila Mikhailovna Skibneeva. And this painting was painted in 1977. So I had tried to Google her before, and I didn't find anything about her. But then it just happened. My daughter put Cyrillic onto the iPad, I think just because she figured out how to do it. And so I then Googled her name in Cyrillic. And of course, you come up with a whole host of information. So this was the page that popped up when I Googled her name. Um, and as you can imagine, I was very surprised to see this painting that looked so similar to mine. I just, that never occurred to me in a million years that this would pop up. And so I clicked on this picture, and I found a whole little biography about Ludmila Skibneeva. So this is her here. And the gallery was it's in Ekaterinburg, where she lives. And it was in this biography that I learned that she had survived the siege of Leningrad as a child and was still alive and painting and working on solo exhibitions in her 80s. And so after I read, and there was a few articles I read about her, and I was just fascinated by this woman who would have lived through such huge changes and historic times throughout her life. And I started wondering, in 1977, when she painted this painting, what was her life like at the time? And who was this girl? And what was the circumstances that she had painted this painting? And also, what were the circumstances that made her sell it in 1999 in Moscow, so far from where she was? Um, Now, at the time, I was taking a creative writing class just for the fun of it. I certainly had no ambition to write a book. Um, it was kind of a break because I was between jobs and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. So I was in kind of a funny place. And this creative writing class was just something fun to do. Um, and the more I started thinking about this character who had painted the painting, um, the more I started thinking that actually this could be a very good book. That not her life specifically, but to be more free about it and to create a story of an artist who survived the siege of Leningrad, goes on to paint this painting and sells it in the 90s. And so I started working on it, and I realized I needed some help because I had never written a book before. And so I enrolled in an MA class, and it was called the First Novel MA program, and it was at a university that's about a 15-minute walk from my house. So that really worked well, and it all felt like it was meant to be. Um, and I started to learn how to write and create a story. And and at the time, you just wonder if you can do it. Is it possible that I could do this? So, it just starts with a very small dream at the beginning, as these things do. And so as I was working on this, oh, actually, I'm gonna read a little bit from the book. This is the scene where the main character Galina, I changed the artist's name. I didn't use Ludmila's name because it isn't her story. It's a completely fictional story, using probably four facts from her life as a springboard in the beginning. So the main character's name is Galina, and the girl in the painting is Sveta. And here it is, the scene where she paints this painting. Galina and Sveta make their way to the grassy field. The sun is much stronger without the protection of the trees. Galina squints in the bright light. Several low concrete walls along the water's edge form pens for the geese. Sveta, Galina calls, sit here. Sveta perches on the edge of the wall. Behind her, hundreds of geese lazily swim, dipping their heads below the water and lifting them out again. The orange ribbons in her hair match the color of the geese bills exactly, and her hair shines in the sun. It's perfect. Galena slides the easel from her shoulder, extends the legs, and flips open the box. She rests the cardboard on the easel and tightens the screws, fixing it in place. Galena presses the paint tubes firmly, winding them from the bottom, creating an arc of color along the upper edge of the wooden palette. Taking a narrow, round brush from the box, she looks at Sveta closely. Galena mixes raw umber and a bit of solvent. The paint thins, leaving only a hint of pigment on the brush. The sun seeps through her cotton painting smock, warming her back. How long will it take? Asked Sveta sweetly. We'll take a break for lunch in an hour. Just try to relax. Should I smile? You don't have to. I'll tell you when I'm doing your face. Her brushes dance, partnered with the symphony of the squawking geese. The languid ebb and flow of their movements put her in a trance as she focuses her attention on the emerging portrait. Sveta, peaceful and innocent, sits with her hands folded on her lap. Galena wants to capture the freshness of childhood, the simplicity of the moment, and the promise of the future. So that gives you a little flavor of what the book is like. Um, Also, I will say with when I started writing, I did see this as a story that would give particularly Western readers a glimpse into Russia, the Russia that I had seen. Um, the Russia that perhaps they don't know about, beyond what the cliches or the news or different things they've heard in the past. And this idea, I think it really does link back to my experiences in ISAC, because that was the whole purpose of ISAC, was to foster international understanding between people. And so I feel like this book is a bit of a next step, along that path. So it's definitely born out of those things that I experienced years ago. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the research that I did for the book. So I am not an expert on Russian history, and I'm not a Russian. So I took it very, very seriously that the book needed to be authentic and respectful to the history of of Russia. And I think, especially when you're writing about a culture that isn't your own, this responsibility is even greater. That it needs to be done respectfully. I've always loved historical fiction, reading um, as a reader. I don't think I ever realized the amount of research that goes into creating historical fiction novels. Um, so, in general, I did a huge amount of reading, uh, and only a tiny, tiny fraction actually makes it into the book. A lot of it is just background reading that gives you a flavor of the time period. But I found the nonfiction reading that I did for this book really, really important and it gave me lots of ideas of different ideas for plot. Um, so some of the books that were very helpful were these Orlando Figes books, and as well Svetlana Alexeyevich, because she records oral histories. Um, that gave a really excellent view of what just ordinary people were experiencing. So, and I think this aspect of social history of understanding the ordinary people, is something that it's very difficult to find information. And also, there were loads of interviews with people of that generation who would have been children during the siege of Leningrad. So there were loads of interviews from Russian television and from various documentaries. This documentary is a Dutch documentary, which was excellent. That was very, very helpful. And there was also another documentary called Moja Perestroika, which was very helpful in kind of reminiscing on back onto the changes during Perestroika. The one really difficult time period to research actually was the 70s, because I didn't want that time period to be sort of cliched and stereotypical view of the Soviet years. So I found reading fiction from that time period that would have been written in that time period. I found that was really helpful, and I became a Dovlatov fan while researching this book. So the history, this aspect was really important, that I got it authentic and I could get it right. So those are some of the books that were helpful. Another book that was very, very helpful is this one, which is a big coffee table book, um, called The Hermitage During the War. And it's a Russian publisher. Um, in there's loads of photographs of the Hermitage during the war. Um, and that was very helpful into creating those scenes. And as well as photographs, it also had loads of drawings. So some of the people that were in the Hermitage during the war, there was at its peak, I think there was 1,200 people living in the basement of the Hermitage, and they were mostly employees and their families, and the some of them did drawings of the different scenes as they were in this basement. And the drawings, I think, are wonderful because they capture more than just physically what it looked like. You get a kind of a sense of the mood of what people were going through during that time. And so in my book, part of the World War II siege bit is set in the Hermitage. So this was very helpful, this book. Um, so this is coming to the end of my presentation. Just gonna check this. Um, so once I got the book written, um, it then became a task to get it published. Um, and that, again, when I started this project, I had no idea of what that would entail. The traditional route to publishing a book is you find an agent, and then an agent will find a publisher. But in my case, I really struggled to find an agent. And um, and by this stage, you can imagine, my heart was really set on seeing this book come into print. And so it was very frustrating that I was struggling to find an agent for so long. And even though the book, it was listed for several prizes in that were for manuscripts for unpublished books, and so it even was listed for 4 different prizes on long lists and short lists, but it never, I just couldn't find an agent. And so I then decided to approach independent publishers to, and they're publishers who don't require the author to have an agent. And it was through that process that I finally found my agent, Lightning Books. And from the very beginning, it was a wonderful match because the editor really understood the book really well. He understood what I was doing. Um, so working with him, it was really, it was great because he he didn't make huge changes to my book. So the editor, Simon Edge, was wonderful throughout. And I think the publisher, they did a great job on the cover. So it's all worked out really well with this publisher. Um, and also, again, I had no idea what it would be like once the book was published. And one of the things that happens is people start to review the book. So there's a huge community of bloggers who write reviews of books. And I'll be honest, I didn't even know that these people existed before I became an author. But one of the women that reviewed my book, her name just happens to be Galina, like my heroine. And she is of Russian heritage. She's here in the UK, but it's somebody I've never met. And when she read the book, it really touched her because she saw her own family in the family that I was writing about. And so when she wrote this wonderful review about how much it had touched her reading this book and how many memories it brought up for her, she then created this gorgeous collage of the book with these items around it. And I don't think I had been really prepared to hear from people and from readers. And every now and then I get a email from a reader who just writes to say how the book has touched them. And it's really wonderful for an author. And in my case, particularly when it's a Russian person, it is even better. And I always say that a wonderful review from a Russian is worth 10 good reviews from anyone else. And it just makes me think we got the book right, and that it is authentic and it rings true for people. Um, and that's very heartwarming. Um, so I think that is nearly it. I hope you enjoyed this presentation about some of my influences, um, and my experiences in Russia. I can open the questions now. So if you have a question, you're welcome to unmute yourself and just ask it, because I don't think we have a huge number of people. You're welcome to either unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can put the question into the chat. Either one. Are there any questions?
Hi. Yeah, hi. I have a quick question. So it's fascinating hearing and really interesting to hear about your, not just the process you went through for this book, but also the discovery of being a first-time author. So I thought that was really honest and kind of, you know, sincere to hear about that. I haven't read the book yet, just because I've got a huge pile of to be read, and I'm not letting myself buy any new books until I've got through those. But it's at the top of my list to read. But are you planning any others about Russia, or is that going to be a one-off, do you think?
No, the next one that I'm researching is actually sort of a prequel. So I take one of the characters from this book and I go back to the Russian Revolution when he would have been like in his 20s. And so I'm working on that now. It's more difficult because you know, again, that social history of ordinary people, it's very difficult to get information. And I think especially when it isn't, the further you go back, the less there is. But I'm having good luck with memoirs, various memoirs. So even people who were either academics or you know, there was an opera singer, and his memoir was very helpful because it gives just a snapshot into, you know, what they were eating and what they saw and what they experienced. So so it's more difficult, the research, because there's just less of it. You know, there's less information of that kind of ordinary people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Any other questions? Well, we can end it a bit early if we'd like. It's it's been a great experience, and I'm so glad some of you could come. And I'll have a recording on my website as well. So I think some of the people who registered, they didn't make it today, so it'll be on my website. I think as things open up, everyone has more things to do. So it'll be on my website. Were there any other questions? No? Okay. Well, we'll end it there. And thank you so much for coming today. And I look forward to hearing from you. Just send me a message on my website, or follow me on social media. And thank you for coming. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.